I'm Lisa Shepard, and I am the Executive Director of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. The mission of the CJCP is to enhance professionalism among North Carolina lawyers, judges, and law students, a mission which it has been doing since 1998. One of the ways that the CJCP does this is to sponsor this historical video series, which is a collection of video interviews of distinguished lawyers, judges, and professionals from across North Carolina. The CJCP began filming these video interviews in 2000 as a means to preserve the thoughts of these bar leaders on the legal profession and on professionalism issues. All of the videos in this series are available to you on the CJCP website and the CJCP's dedicated YouTube channel. We are so fortunate to have had many distinguished members of the North Carolina Bar over the years, and they have much accumulated wisdom to share with us. It is important to understand that the practice of law is a profession, and doing it well requires not only substantive knowledge that one gains in law school and from studying for the bar exam, but also the value of experience learned from other lawyers. I hope that this video series will give you not only a fresh insight into the person being interviewed, but also some meaningful information about how to be a better lawyer in your own practice. Enjoy, and remember, esse quam videri. Strive to be professional in all that you do, rather than to merely seem so.
Well, this is a fine, or as they would say, a high occasion for me. And congratulations on winning yet another award.
Well, thank you. I'm very, very honored to be with that crowd up there. That is an honor beyond any imagining by me.
The Chief Justice Commission on Professionalism has provided many benefits to our state already, and every time I think about it or anything, when I read the list of those who've won the award you have won, I have this sensation. I think it's Longfellow, may their tribe increase. And I feel that way about this one. Well, once upon a time, you came into the world, and it was in Charlotte, and I know that much because I've followed you for some time now. And you have a childhood that very few people will know about, and I wish you'd trace a few minutes of that.
Well, I had a childhood that relatively few people had. I was quite privileged. My father was a successful lawyer, and we lived in southeast Charlotte in Myers Park, which is an upscale area. And so I grew up there.
You went away to boarding school to Woodbury Forest right after junior high, is that when
I went in the 9th grade, yeah.
And so you were there for the rest
I
of
was there for 4 years, 9,
Yeah.
10, 11, and 12.
And you played ball there.
I did. That was one of the saving graces. They did have pretty good sports, and I love sports.
You were football and tennis and baseball.
No, football and track and baseball.
And baseball.
I wanted to be a baseball player. I had no doubt that I'd play in the major leagues. My only doubt was whether I was going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I see. Well, you've made the Hall of Fame. Perhaps there's more of a contribution for your achievements in other fields than in baseball. Did you? And I'm almost sure you went to college following graduation from Woodbury. And the school is in New Jersey. In fact, once it was called the College of New Jersey.
It was, Princeton University. Yeah.
And because I've researched you thoroughly, I know that you joined the Cottage Club.
Right.
Not that long after F. Scott Fitzgerald, but doubtless inspired by him.
Yeah, right.
And played baseball for the Tigers.
I played baseball. I went up there. I was really interested in sports. I went to Princeton because of the sports, but also because it was a good school. It really was a very good school. And I liked it a lot. And I thought I was a quarterback in high school, not a very good one. I could throw the ball, and I could run if nobody got in the way, but so I went out for football. Only the freshmen play, and the freshmen scrimmaged against the varsity one time, and there was a fellow named Reddy Finney, who was an All-American guard. And I had the ball one time with the option of either pitching it out or going off guard. and that's how I met Reddy Finney.
That's it.
And he persuaded me not to go out for football. So I played baseball and ran cross country at Princeton.
Yes, yeah, that's a. Well, but you were in school, and people know well you had remarkable academic achievements. And you came to Duke for law school.
Well, I came to Duke before that.
A tad early because you were trying to protect your interests, I remember.
Exactly. I loved Princeton, but there was a young lady down at Duke that I had to write letters to. We, in those 2 years, we wrote a total of 300 letters to each other. And I thought, well, you know, and then she was telling me how much fun she was having going to basketball games with other men down there, so I thought I better go down. So I left Princeton and transferred to Duke for 1 year before going to law school.
Well, that's a story that I think it's time before you would need a subpoena to produce her name.
Yeah, she was Sally Dalton.
Right,
yeah.
It's Sally Dalton Robinson for the ensuing period.
Indeed.
Yeah. And I'll go back to law school because you scraped by there, being editor-in-chief of the Duke Law Journal and making extraordinary grades. And you formed friendships there. You might tell the
I did.
group how important those friendships were.
I went to I went one undergraduate year at Duke, and then went to law school. And if I had gone all 3 years at Duke and then to law school, I would have gotten an undergraduate degree when I finished my first year in law school, but they didn't count my Princeton year, so I don't have an undergraduate degree. I never graduated from college.
Well, in a manner of speaking, I suppose that
but
is.
Duke Law School was small then, but it really had a good faculty, a real good faculty, and I enjoyed it very much.
And friendships form. One of them that matters in the firm's name today is Robert Bradshaw, who was the editor-in-chief the year following you.
That's right. He was a year behind me, and we got to be friends in undergraduate school, and then he finished. He went 4 years.
He was president of student body.
He was president of student body, and so he came. So he was a year behind me, and we were good friends, Sally and I, and Bob and Janet. So.
Yeah. Well, that's and I'm almost sure for those who have watched Seinfeld, they ought to know that a classmate of his and a friend of yours was William Louis Dreyfus. His daughter Julia rose to some prominence outside the legal field,
Indeed.
if I remember. So that's but I don't imagine y'all knew her then. So
Sal and I saw where he'd made a donation somewhere, and so he's still doing good things in that way.
While you were there, you secured the idea, and I don't know just what it was, and those listening won't know how you secured the idea to write this book. This book is, I'll hold it here so the camera can catch it. I think this is the first edition.
That's the first edition.
And it's red, for those who,
yeah.
And it has your name, North Carolina Corporation Law and Practice. Now, this is quite an undertaking. I'm at Form 24 just as I opened one of the pages, and the text runs into the hundreds, of course, into over 600 pages. That was the first go at it. How did this come about?
That's interesting. In fact, maybe my favorite professor at Duke Law School was Jack Laddie, who later was the dean of the law school, and he taught corporation law. He was really the corporation professor anywhere. I mean, and so he was guiding the legislature in adopting the Business Corporation Act as our corporation law. And I was interested in that, and he knew I was, and he talked with me about it a little bit, and I with him. So that was when I was in law school, and the act was enacted when I graduated. And the year that it went into effect, the North Carolina Bar Association had a seminar, had a program on that. And they asked me, just a few months out of law school, to take one. Jack Laddie asked me to take one of the subjects, and my subject was drawing the bylaws and the articles of incorporation. That was sort of the key subject. So I got up there with only being 6 months out of law school to lecture to all the lawyers on how you did that. And that was something of a start. And then not long after that, somebody from the Harrison Book Publishing Company in Atlanta
Here they are, Harrison.
came and asked me to write a book. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. I like to write. So I started in on that. And about 7, 8 years later, there it was. So
Well, that's how long for the first edition of the book?
It took about 5 years, 6 years.
5 or 6 years. Well, the North Carolina Corporation Act became a model, if I remember correctly, for such legislation around the nation.
Well, no, it was really the other way around. There was the Model Business Corporation Act.
I see. We patterned after that.
Yes, and that's what Jack Laddie was doing, was adopting, having that act drawn for adoption by the legislature based on the Business Corporation Act with certain local modifications.
Right. Well, I was searching for greater prominence for our state again. But what I don't have to search for is the history of this book and the following editions.
Each year I had to write a supplement. You'll see the supplement.
They'll have
there.
pocket parts, yeah, sure.
And then new editions, and it went through 6 editions.
Yeah, here they are.
And finally, in the last one, it was published in that form, a 3-ring binder, where instead of a supplement and then new editions, it can be
and this says
kept
7th
up to
edition
date.
here, and here we go. Is that these are my props for the interview? This is all of them. But is this the last one? Is the last one I saw?
Well, yeah. I mean that's the 7th edition, and that will be the last edition because, as I say, all of that can be the pages replaced in there. Right.
Well,
and they wanted it when I left Harrison Company and went with Mickey. They were the ones that wanted it renamed to Robinson on North Carolina Corporation Law. I didn't like that much, but that's what they did, so there it is.
But it's the same Robinson, is it not?
I think no, it's not, as a matter of fact. No, it's not. It's one who's been through all those years of being imprisoned by that book.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. Well, if this goes on, we may have a copyright infringement claim. So we've given the outlines of what happened, but this was a fundamental event in your life, of course.
Yes, it was.
And as you reflect on it now, I think the way I would think about it is I really can't believe that this has happened and gone on this long.
Mm-hmm.
The first edition was 1960 or so?
64, I believe.
Yeah. And we're a few years hence.
Mm-hmm.
But
right now I can't believe I wrote it.
Yeah.
I mean, if I sat down to write it, I wrote it in longhand. And if I sat down to write it out in longhand, it would take a month or so.
Yeah. For perspective, you were in your early 30s when you wrote it.
Late 20s.
Late 20s when you started.
I was born in 32, so I was 32 when it was published.
I was doing it published. I thought it would be about 32, but you started it, of course, in your 20s.
Yeah. Well, Sally bore the brunt of that because I was still working through all those things, and on nights and weekends I wrote it, and I'd spend all day Saturday and Sunday and many nights late into the nights working on the thing. So she was the one who bore the brunt of that.
The dedication to her in the front
Well,
of the book.
yeah, I
bears
wrote a
that
book,
out.
and the only thing she's ever read in the book was the dedication.
I'm not moving to remedy that, but we could consider it, I suppose. Speak to her. Thank goodness, at least for the likes of me, what you were also doing is starting our law firm. And it began in 1960. I know that much of the story. And you might just say how y'all were almost sure you would have 4 or 5 lawyers. That was the ambition for size.
Well, yeah, I came to work out of law school for what was then Laster, Moore and Van Allen. Bob Laster went off, and so it's now Moore and Van Allen. But when I went with them, that was one of the largest firms, maybe the largest firm in North Carolina. I was the 11th lawyer, and maybe 12th. And I went with that firm, and Carlton Fleming was also a Duke law graduate, Duke undergraduate and law graduate. And we got to be very good friends. He lived nearby, and we drove the same car. I would drive mine, and he would, and got to be very good friends. So I came with the firm in 1956, and Carlton and I started talking about leaving the firm and forming our own firm, which we did in 1960. We were good friends. We were good friends until he died, but we didn't agree on things much. And on the 50th anniversary of the book, I took a copy of I had rewritten and took a copy of my book and left it on his thing. And he called me up and he said, he had left the firm then, called me up and said, let's go celebrate our anniversary. And so we went to the City Club to celebrate our anniversary and got into an argument about exactly when we started. But we left, and we didn't want to have a big firm. We said we were going to have only 5 lawyers. And something went wrong there. So,
but Bob Bradshaw came. He'd gone to Cravath, Swain, and Moore.
Yeah, right. And actually, as I said, we got to be good friends, and so I called him and said, Carlton and I started, and we didn't, I called him and said, and got him to come down to Laster, Moore and Van Allen. He left New York and came down there. So when Carlton and I left, we didn't ask him to come with us because we didn't know whether we were going to make a go of it or not. And about 6 months later, it was apparent that we were going to make a go of it. So I called him, and he left and came with us. So that's how the firm got started.
Well, I'm most grateful you did that and that you went past 5. I'm a good while later, and most appreciative that you kept going.
That was, the law wasn't as complicated then. It really wasn't.
I was going to ask you.
And lawyers didn't need to specialize, and we could have handled things with 5 lawyers. You couldn't do that now because of specialization.
It's you might speak of that. I saw an interview of you when you were speaking about the fundamental changes. It was another award you had won, and I was taken by how, from your perspective, the most dramatic, to use a phrase from your earlier expression, changes that you've seen in your time at the bar.
Practice law really has changed, I'd say fundamentally, and not for the better. And the main driver of that is digitalization of the email and digitalized preparation of documents. Such that lawyers now deal with each other mainly through email, which depersonalizes it. It's impersonal. They don't get together like they used to as lawyers representing clients and dealing with each other. It's the impersonal exchange of emails and documents by emails. and as a consequence, it's less professional, I think. And one aspect of that is that lawyers now more and more take on their client's position. They lose their independence to be able to examine their client's position because it becomes their position too. And that's an undermining of the professionalism that I think is really regrettable. Another thing is that documents can be prepared right there on the spot while the parties are meeting. And they're meeting there, and then they reach the agreement. They turn to the lawyer, where's the document? Because it can be made right there. That too used to be your clients would agree on something, you go off and prepare the document and sleep on it overnight and
reflection.
Yeah,
not as much, nearly as much reflection today.
So I think those aspects of it, and the bar is trying to deal with that now, I think.
Well, the Commission on Professionalism is, of course, has much on its mind, if I can make it to a person for that, and that is that and related challenges are much with us.
Yeah.
2 of your 3 children, Cammie and Russ, are lawyers.
Right.
Did you persuade them to become lawyers?
No, definitely not. I didn't want to do that.
I was almost sure of that. Yeah. And then his son Sally runs the library at the Harvard Business School, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But Cammie and Russell became lawyers. Cammie clerked for Lewis Powell in the Supreme Court.
Cammie, my daughter Cammie would be a better lawyer than I. She really has a legal ability, and went to law school, and then did clerk for Justice Powell, and then came to practice briefly in New York. They sent her to Australia. And so she left then
Not
and went to the
borough.
and worked some for the Legal Aid Society in New York. Came to Charlotte, came with our firm, but that didn't work.
She was doing, I'm going to rebut the founder by saying she was spectacular, but when the children came along, she wanted to devote herself that way.
Right.
It's a thoroughly honorable and wonderful thing. But I, for one, with many others, do miss her. We'd take all but they keep coming. Will, your grandson, is a lawyer. There may be more lawyers who are grandchildren.
No, he's my son Russ went to Wake Forest Law School of all things, and he's a lawyer, and so his son Will is a lawyer. William Russell Robinson.
Right. I don't want to miss this because I'm a fan of genealogy. That's not to say that I understand it, but when the lawyers are so deep and they keep running, you referred to your father having been a lawyer, and he practiced with his brother, William Smith.
He didn't.
His brother was a lawyer.
He had 2 brothers.
Right.
William Smith O'Brien Robinson, W.S.O.B. Robinson, was his older brother, and then my father John Robinson, and then my unmarried uncle Russell Robinson, for whom I'm named. So those are the 3 lawyers in the family.
And then one generation back, and skipping over to your mother's side, are the Rodmans.
Well, one generation back was my father's father, W.S.O.B. Robinson, who was a Republican judge, who was a lawyer, and he was elected as a judge in the 1896 when the Republicans took over. So he was a Republican trial court judge.
Yes.
And on my mother's side, it goes back 2 or 3 generations of lawyers.
Well, William Blount Rodman was the principal drafter of the Constitution of 1868, by which North Carolina secured readmission to the Union.
Right.
He's your mother's
my mother's grandfather.
Right. So your great-grandfather. He was a leading advocate for let's not elect judges.
Indeed.
This interview isn't long enough to cover the unfailing merits of that position, so I'll move to this point. But William Blount Rodman, following that, went to the became a member of a justice of the Supreme Court of our state. Is
Right.
that
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And served there for some time.
Right.
And his
then
son was a lawyer?
His son was a lawyer. That's my mother's father, whom I knew well. He
And
lived in Washington. I mean, well, yeah, they started in Little Washington. Mother didn't like me to call it Little Washington.
That's why I didn't.
But anyways, Washington, North Carolina, and then moved to Charlotte, and then became counsel for the Norfolk Southern Railway and moved to Norfolk, and that's where I knew him there.
Well, yes.
I remember him well.
Wow. And I get lost in which relation it was, but one of them, and you'll please tell the group, was a judge, and I think it was on riding the circuit and would ride the rails somewhere west, and they had a trial of a collection action, and the fellow who lost shot the fellow who won, and then your mother received a letter from him. I think it was your mother, and said it reported those facts, and then in the next line said the plaintiff won this case. The defendant shot him leaving the courtroom. We tried his case the following day.
Oh, that was in Morganton.
Morganton.
That was
yes.
in Morganton. Yeah,
that was something like that happened, though, didn't it?
They shot him on the courthouse steps.
Yeah, that's what you told me.
They shot him, and so they went and tried the fellow who shot him.
Yeah.
And the general reaction to that was he should have been shot.
Yes,
so they tried him one day and they didn't convict him.
Yes,
I'd forgotten.
It was a remarkable day of litigation.
That doesn't
Burke
involve
County
my
courts.
family much, except that.
Well, his father was the judge.
He was there,
so
the judge.
Sort of involved. I would
Sort
say. Yeah. Well, there are more stories than we could tell. What has been for you as you've watched the law firm you began change, and the people who've come from all over? What are your reflections on that?
I'm very, very proud of it because I think it's a good law school, a law firm, and I think we are the only. I believe we are the only law firm. I haven't been able to identify one that where billable hours are not generally known. I don't know how many billable hours and you don't know how many I make. At one point later, the managing partner, we gave access to that information.
He or she's the only one who has it.
Right. But that was so.
You'll remember, you told us that would affect deployment, if you will. How many lawyers should go into one field or another another?
Right.
And if you don't know how many hours being billed, someone doesn't know.
But
that person, the managing partner, her lips are sealed from that on that subject.
Right. But I think that idea of not knowing the amount of billable hours is not known by those who set compensation. So it's not driven, and consequently, lawyers are not, they don't have any reason to have 3 lawyers at a meeting trying to bill up their billable hours. And I think, and it also minimizes or reduces intra-firm competition. So I'm real proud of that.
You used the phrase with me when I was coming through the process. You said, it ought to be a commandment, one of the commandments for lawyers, thou shalt not covet each other's clients. Let them be clients of the law firm and not of a lawyer.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, we do know who's bringing in clients, but that is not a part of our compensation at all. Those two aspects really make it for this word is overworked, but a collegial firm, and I think we are collegial. And we have also, Duke Law School really helped us begin. Carlton did well, and I did well at Duke Law School, and the faculty there was helpful to us in recommending to us lawyers that would really be good and recommending us to them. And as a consequence, we were building a Duke Law School firm and began taking people who didn't go to Duke Law School. I think Vinroot, who's one of our greats, I think maybe he was the first one we went over and took for Chapel Hill, for goodness sake.
Well, it was a fine day's work.
And then Virginia.
And then Virginia, and now across the country, and that's been a great blessing for all of us who are.
But we've taken
enjoying
people
that.
with the idea that they would become partners, and we've really tried to take the top people, law review people. So we built a firm that I'm very, very proud of.
It's a passage of levity I'd like to try for levity. I remember when I was a very new lawyer, Bob Bradshaw, our devoted friend and partner, came to my office and was on a collection tour. He was collecting $3 or $4 from every lawyer to buy a Christmas gift for you. You and Sally had recently bought a mountain cottage in Linville, and he had this idea. I think those listening would enjoy your telling them the idea he had and how this was notable in the long list of tricks he played on you.
Well, let me just say generally about Bradshaw, he had the best sense of humor, I believe, of anybody I know. He could always pick out from any situation or communication the one aspect of it that was sort of out of line and humorous. And so he did one time. We'd bought this house in Linville, and he, as you say, collected money and bought a clock. And it was absolutely the ugliest piece of. I mean, it was just.
It was from the Mobil or Exxon in the mail. You would get these advertisements.
I don't know how he got it, but it was.
He showed it to us.
Yeah, well,
he showed us the picture of what was coming.
Well, it was awful.
Yeah.
So there I was in my office, and this package arrives as a gift, and I open it up, and there's this clock given to me and a letter from the donor saying how much he appreciated what I had done for him, and he hopes this clock will recognize that and be a reminder to me of how much I had helped him. And it was. And
would go into the mountain cottage. He knew enough to know it was the mountain cottage.
It was written on plain stationery, and there was no letter or address or anything. And it was signed with a sort of like that, with looked like maybe a J. And Bradshaw's office was next to mine, and I took that in there to him and said, "Look at this." And look at this. Who in the world is this? Oh, he said, I don't know. He said, but I think, well, you really ought to take that up there to Linville and put it in your house.
So he can see it.
So we can see it up there. And I went back and so I thought, well, whoever this is, I've got to write him a letter thanking him for this clock. And this looks like it's Jim. And I looked at it, the more I looked at it, I said, well, this is Jim. And it's Jim, Jim Merrill, I think, with the bank. A really important person. And I thought, well, he sent me this thing. I've got to write this letter. So I wrote out the letter to him. And dear Jim, thank you very much for this clock. And I took the letter in to show it to Bradshaw. And that's when he said, no, I don't believe you ought to send that letter.
That was a marvelous,
episode. That was typical Bradshaw. He really had that ability.
He saw, once upon a time, it reminds me, James Brown, of whom I was quite a fan, had fallen badly aside from the law and had been arrested. And they had put him in jail, I think, on the Congaree River near Columbia for various things, a collection of things he had done. And the movement began to free him. And I had friends who sent me a stack of bumper stickers, and they were orange field with white letters, 3 words, "Free James Brown." And I put one on my car, and Bob Bradshaw spotted it. And I know you'll remember this because he said, "Do you have another bumper sticker?" And I said, "Well, I do." He said, "I think it would look very good on Russell Robinson's car." So we did two things. One is we waited till you were not going to be down there when you had the very, if I may say, a stodgy Buick, and it fit just perfectly on the stodgy Buick. And we put it in a spot where you were not likely to see it on the back unless you, so the way your car was aimed that day in the parking lot. We went down there together and we put it on, and then he did one other thing. He called Sally Robinson and said, "Here's what we've done. Don't tell him it's on the car, on his car, and we're going to see how many days it is before he notices." And when you went places, people would blow their horns and wave to you and thumbs up and do other things like that. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I remember that.
Free James Brown.
Toot toot with that.
And Bradshaw was with you for one of those, and you said, "Wonder what's going on," and he said, "Well, it's just a friendly fellow." You don't, maybe you know him. I brought props, but I'm glad you had this prop. I'm glad you had this.
Princeton, I said I loved Princeton, but I love Sally more. But the athletics up there, and I told you, Forrest was playing for Dartmouth, and that was always the last game. And I said they're going to play that twice while Forrest is there, and I want to go with you each time. Well, we went one time, which was I think it was the Palmer Stadium. It was the last game ever played in Palmer Stadium because they tore Palmer Stadium down. When we were leaving, I think I could have gotten aboard one of the seats of Palmer Stadium. And then the next time we went up, 2 years later, they had the new stadium, and there's a picture of you and me and Forrest in the new stadium. And I just
right
think that brings back so great memories.
It means a great deal to me and to him that you. No one is more true to his word than you.
Yeah,
you did that mighty well.
That was very, very special. Seeing him play in the last and then the first of those stadiums.
We spoke shortly ago about the challenges to our profession now, and the particular challenge to professionalism when we have the torrid pace that all of the bar is witnessing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you say about the best, I'll call it, defense measures to that, and in particular, your advice about how our profession can cling to its best ideals?
Well, let me say first, I'm very proud to get this award on professionalism because I think that is our biggest challenge, is to get back to the professionalism that has been so notable in our profession of lawyers. And it, as I said earlier, it is really under attack now. Because of technology, because the technology allows the lawyers, as I said, to generate things without interaction among the lawyers that used to be such an important part of being a lawyer, is discussing the situation with opposing lawyers, with the lawyer representing the other side. And in that interaction of lawyers, they were lawyers, and they had their own. They represented their clients, but their client's case was not their case, so they could talk to each other as professionals who had a detachment from their client's case, and we've lost that, and we need to get that back, because and so I would new lawyers coming along. I've talked with my grandson Will about that you are a lawyer, that your client's case is you representing your client, and you do it to the best of your ability within the ethics of the profession. And I really hope we can recapture that. The bar is working on that now because it's recognized that the law has become more of a business than a profession in a lot of people's minds. And business clients expect that. They expect you to be more a part of what they're doing and on their side. And the technology, as I said, is a big part of that. I hope that's clear enough, because I think it's the biggest challenge of our profession, and it's extremely important.